Okay, our goal as OPA is to be global. We're ambitious petroleum engineers who started this initiative in Egypt, and now we're present in Lebanon and in Sudan. And we're planning to spread all among the world in the future. This started to take place in our projects that I will talk about in the next slides. So our first service is the technical consulting and studies for the companies. We have high-profile experts in oil and gas industry who are ready to help you optimize your project's outcomes and tackle the technical problems you're facing. And we already did one with Powerline Technical Services, which is a service company for oil and gas in Egypt. And we provided them with a technical study for HSE system. And our second service is professional training courses. We made a professional training course in ESP for the winter shell DEA in Egypt. And we also provided software training courses in softwares like Prosper OFM for engineers from Gazprom Neft, Vantage Drilling Company, Anton, and Wisdom Solutions. Our third service is the internship, where we organized 2 internships, one offline in this, last December and one online in the previous month. And we had students from 7 universities in 3 countries, in Lebanon, Pakistan, and France. And if you have any other questions about OPA and our service, you can contact us on our email, opa@opacourses.com, OPA Online Petroleum Academy on LinkedIn and Facebook, and at OPA Lebanon on Instagram. And now I would like to introduce our speakers today. The first speaker is Engineer Eng.Hany Shaker. He is the General Manager of Feasibility Studies and Projects Evaluation Department at Egyptian General Petroleum Corporation, EGPC. And he is a member of Gas Pricing Committee, Agreements Renewal and Extension, Improved Brownfield Performance, and other committees in the Egypt Ministry of Petroleum. Our second speaker is Ms.Diana she's the Executive Director of the Lebanese Oil and Gas Initiative, LOGI, which is an independent non-governmental organization based in Beirut, Lebanon. She's responsible for the successful leadership, management, and operations of LOGI as per the strategic direction that entails developing a network of Lebanese experts in the global energy industry and providing them with a platform to support Lebanese policy makers, as well as educate and guide Lebanese citizens on the key issues related to the oil and gas industry. And now I would like to invite our first speaker, Engineer Hani, to start his presentation. And to remind you, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, and at the end of the session, we will answer them all. Engineer Hani, the stage is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, it's a great honor to me to be with you in this interesting webinar. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of the organizers for this webinar, OPA, Lebanon Oil and Gas Initiative, LOGI, to give me the chance to discuss with you this interesting topic, Lebanon Exploration Production Agreement, pros and cons. The agenda for this webinar is start with introduction about the importance of petroleum contracts and especially in general and especially for emerging countries and the relationship between the host countries and the other partners, which is the investors or the international oil companies, IOC. After that, we will move to discuss the economic terms of the Lebanon EPA Exploration Production Agreement model. Let's start with the introduction. As you know, discovery of oil and the gas, oil and gas generate much excitement. And the mere mention of natural resource discovery, especially of oil and gas, ignite personal and national dreams of rich and hopes and of wealthy time. Most of the developing nations view their natural resources as an asset not belonging to any private party, regardless of who may own the surface land and the rights. the nation owns the assets. The nation owns the assets, and this is protected, and this position is often protected in the constitution of any state or the most fundamental law of these states. The emerging players in oil and gas, such as Mozambique, Mauritania, Lebanon, or Azerbaijan, optimistically view such a valuable treasure as a fast track to development. Their vision of tomorrow is oil-rich nations such as Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates of today. But this emotional image of a beautiful tomorrow often face the reality. This reality represented in financial and commercial or political changes of transforming locked underground asset into a useful liquid cash. And sometimes this emotion can turn into anger. For example, the recent popular protest in Mozambique and Venezuela, or even the situation in Libya. It's all about the natural resources. This destroyed dreams pose significant political, economical risk for the energy industry or for the decision maker, for the consuming as the nation. And this is an issue. How can the challenges of rising desires and demands be satisfied? So both governments and international oil company spend more efforts into understanding the technical and commercial aspect of of oil and gas field development. However, the first challenge for government are the negotiation challenges. Okay, and as you know, upstream petroleum contracts, agreements, and associated fiscal regime are the keystone of the relationship between the host countries or its national oil company, NOC, and the foreign investor, which is the international oil company. And fiscal regime is the tools of implementing the particular petroleum policy decided by each host country. The term of the fiscal regime directly reflect the condition under which the IOC accepted to invest in upstream petroleum projects or not. So government always compete for capital and technology to develop their petroleum sector, while the IOC looks for proper investment opportunities that suitable their corporate strategic and risk-reward profiles. The importance of such contracts increase due to the importance of the industry itself, its economic influence, and the nature of the participating partners. And there is no doubt that the oil and gas industry is one of the most important industry all over the world, and an economy of many countries, because many countries or most of the petroleum producing countries rely principally on oil and gas as a major source of national income, such as Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Over the last decade, the economic parameter for oil and gas projects around the world have become increasingly diverse and complex, making the more difficult or the most difficult to determine which fiscal regime are effective in creating a competitive system for investment and which not. This shows the importance of petroleum agreements or petroleum contracts establishment, or what's called the petroleum agreements. So for many years, the collecting of government revenue from the petroleum resources development has been subject to much concern to countries having petroleum reserves. The objective of achieving the maximum benefits in efficient manner is a complex issue, very complex issue. Also, the host government and the investor may share one common objective, which is the desire for the project to generate high levels. Every partners in this industry, IOCs or national oil company, the desire of them is to generate high levels of revenue, but their other goals are not entirely aligned. So there is some of conflict of interest between the objectives of NOCs and the objectives of IOCs. Let's say the investors aim to ensure that the return on investment is consistent with the risk associated with the project and with the corporation strategic objectives. While the host governments aim to maximize the rent for their country over the time, while achieving other development and socio-economic objectives. This comparison in the screen summarize the objective of each partner in any petroleum project. For example, as you see, IOC looking for, we can summarize it in maximizing profits. So IOC looking for maximizing profits through, firstly, appropriate fiscal terms. So the first important thing is the fiscal term, which attract any investor to your country. Appropriate fiscal terms mean, for example, fast payout time or fast payback time through high percentage of cost recovery, high percentage of profit oil. The second important thing is the stability of this term, of this contract, fiscal and contractual visible stability. The investors aims to no adjustment or seek for no adjustment of provision that impact the economic situation for the IOCs. Also, IOC looks for long-term right to oil and gas production that allow the recovery of the initial investment and achieving the target profit. Also, IOC looking for sufficient reserves, reasonable internal rate of return or rate of return, acceptable level of political risk, and this is, by the way, it's a very important issue. And at the end, he looks for some ability of managing the operations. On the other hand, the host countries or petroleum producing countries looking for strategic and economic benefits. This strategic and economic benefits are represented in, firstly, maximize the development of hydrocarbon infrastructure for this important sector. And also they looks for to regulate the base of exploration and the development activity inside the countries. And from the production of oil and gas, the host country looking for secure the oil supply for the domestic market to ensure the stability or the social stability. Also, host countries looks for enhancing local participation in employment and the provision of supplies and equipment for the local market. And it's also look for develop a national bank National Technology Bank through the transfer of know-how between the IOC and the host country's citizens. At the end, it also looks for creation attractive environment to potential investors. This is the family of fiscal systems. E&B agreements in different countries are not the same. Each producing petroleum countries adopt its particular agreement for petroleum exploration and production according to its economic situation, and the most common type for this fiscal models are the concessionary system, which is the royalty tax system, royalty and tax system, and the second part is the contractual system. This contractual system include production sharing or production sharing agreement or production sharing contract, and the surface agreements based on the fees nature. If the fees is taken in cash, so we are talking about the surface contract. If the fees taken in kind, so we are talking about the production sharing contracts. And the surface contract itself also split it into risk surface if the fees is linked to profit, or pure surface contracts if the surface is not linked to the profit. It's a flat fees. This is a flow chart or drawing for the EPA. From my point of view, EPA is a hybrid system. It's a hybrid system because it's a mix between royalty, tax, and profit sharing. And the Offshore Petroleum Resources Law 2010 governs exploration and production for companies operating in offshore Lebanon, and the license are awarded under production sharing contracts. But as I said, it consider a hybrid system. In this system, there is no signature bonus are payable, but the contractor are liable for area fees. There is no mandate for state participation, but the state has the right to take a share in any license. And as you see from this chart, the total production is split into royalty, which is go to the government or the state, and the cost recovery, which is the portion is deducted for recovering the exploration and the development cost, and also operating cost, and the rest is the profit oil. This profit oil in EPA are factor. Okay, let's back to the terms of EPA. License in EPA consists of two separate phases: exploration and development. The exploration phase divided into two phases is to extend by 1 year per each commitment well. There is a commitment in every to drill exploration phase. 25% of the license area must be relinquished at the commencement of the exploration period, and the additional 25% of the original block area if a request is development phase is almost about 30 years be awarded in case of discoveries. As I mentioned in EBAs, there is no signature bonus, and it's by the way, it's very important terms. Signature bonus for example, in the Egyptian model is very important, and they have a great weight in production sharing contract in Egypt. But in EBA, there is no signature bonus payable. There is a training fees are applicable and paid to a certain amount every year. Area fees are payable after the exploration phase has been completed. Regarding the royalty rates for its sliding scale royalty in case of oil discovery, but it's a fixed percentage in gas discovery. It's around 4% of revenue go to the state or the government. And the royalty rates for oil production based and range from 5% to 12% of revenues. Both the rates and the production tiers explained in the model of EBA. Regarding the cost recovery, and it's the second, the more important terms in the cost recovery in the EBA or in any model. Cost recovery ceiling is biddable with a maximum of 65 of net revenue. Cost recovery ceiling rates for blocks 4 and 9, 60% and 65% respectively. All cost, exploration, development, any cost and the operating cost are recoverable in the year they are incurred. And cost in excess, if there is any excess cost of the ceiling, it can be carried forward for the next year without any limit. The rest after cost is the profit sharing. Production remaining after royalty and cost recovery is divided between the contractor and the government on a biddable sliding scale, varying according to the R factor. And as you see in this slide, the profit oil calculation is linked to R factor, and R factor equal to the cumulative cash flow or cumulative cash inflow divided by the cumulative capex. The amount or the value of R factor calculated by this formula, which is cash flow, cumulative cash inflow divided by cumulative capex. And based on the R factor, the profit split is split between the state and IOC or the right holders. This equation you determine the state participation. It's a lot of parameters, but anyway, the cost recovery limit is 60 or 65%, and the profit oil in this model ranges from minimum profit split for the state 30% and 40%. So the profit split in this is this model for the state is 30% at lowest R factor. When R factor less than 1, so the state profit is 30%, and accordingly the IOC portion or the IOC share is 70%. In case of R factor between 1 and 2.5 or 3. So this formula is calculating the state portion or the state share. In case of R factor more than 3, as in block 9 mentioned, the state portion is 40% based on an R factor, and this is the maximum profit split for the state. And accordingly, the IOC or the right holders portion is 60%, but take care or remember that this is after cost recovery percentage, which is 60 or 65 according to the model itself. Regarding the corporate income tax is payable on revenue less royalty, operating and capital expenses depreciated at rate of 20%. VAT also is applicable at rate of 11. Withholding tax for service provided is based on 50% profit and 20% tax, which result in effective withholding tax rate of 10%. Withholding tax for supply equipment is based on 15% profit and 20% tax, which result in effective withholding tax rate of 3%. Contractor also exempt from any custom duties for goods specified by the Petroleum Administration. There is also an important terms in this model, which is the decommissioning. Decommissioning term is very, very important term, especially when we are talking in offshore or in deep offshore. So the decommissioning is quite significant. The cost of decommissioning is very high and should be considered in such models. Fiscal treatment of decommissioning in EPA, there is a provision exists for recovery of abandonment cost through cost oil and gas. The abandonment provision is the first made in the quarter when 50% of the recoverable reserve has been produced. It is calculated on a unit of production basis and based on the estimated cost of abandonment subsequent years and the years of production remaining. The stability of provision or the balance in this model is very important. The stabilization term, EPA includes clauses indicating that if there are any changes in the existing legislation applicable to the contractor's operation, which significantly affect the economic or financial position for the contractor, the parties, the contractor can notify the Minister of Petroleum Administration in Lebanon. The parties can then negotiate appropriate modification or appropriate action to the agreement designed to restore the economic balance to the agreement or the IOC situation. License holder is subject to all Lebanese taxes. In addition, any increase in the corporate income tax rate will be treated as recoverable cost. This is the most economic terms in EPA, the reality, cost recovery, profit oil, contract duration, tax, bonus, decommissioning cost. All these terms is the economic terms in EPA. In this webinar, I will not talk about. I'm not talking about the legal terms in EPA, but this is the most or the key terms that impact the economic of host country and the economic of IOC or right holder. Any change of this, any changes of these terms may harm the economic situation for IOCs. So balance or stability for the stability in the contract must be achieved. There is no change in any of these terms unless the both parties are agreed. So royalty is 60 or 65. Sorry, is 4 for gas, and the cost recovery is ranges from 60 to 65, and the remaining profit oil is linked to oil and gas. Taxes are applicable. There is no bonus in this model. Decommissioning is treated well in this model. Contract duration in this model is for exploration, it's around 5 or 6 years. For the development is 30 years, 20 or 30 years, and it may be 20 and reach to 30, and it's by the way, it's a good duration for the IOCs to recover the initial investment and achieve profits from this contracts. There is some remarks on EPA. There is some remarks from my point of view in EPA regarding the production bonus. There is no production bonus in this model, and by the way, this model is considered as a progressive model that encourage IOCs or attract IOCs for investing in such country in Lebanon. There is no assignment bonus at the end or any time if any partner decide to assign of his right to any company. So in this model, there is no assignment bonus. One of the important remarks about this model is the semi-fixed terms. Although the EPA although EPA using R factor, and R factor is I'm calling R factor which is flexibility tool. R factor, we normally use R factor to make some limits for the IOC's profits. In our case, or in EPA, the limitation is for the state portion. EPA is considered a fixed parameters regarding the profit split. It ranges from 30, which is the minimum percentage for the state, and the maximum is 40%, and this is the maximum percentage from the profit split, from the profit split for the state. Example, block 9, the cost recovery is 65, and the remaining is the profit after cost recovery. The percentage of the profit shouldn't be limited from the side of the state, but this model, the profit for the state is limited with a minimum 30% and the maximum 40%. I have an excuse for this action, which is the Lebanon petroleum sector is still in the first beginning, and in this critical phase, the first priority for the investment attraction and building the infrastructure for this sector. And I believe the tax structure in this model will compensate the state for this low percentage of profit oil. In general, from my point of view, EPA's terms are attractive, and the government is keen to incentivize foreign investors to explore the country oil and gas potential resources. However, the current situation, the demonstration, economic difficulties, maritime borders, dispute with neighbors, and the complex political situation system may impact the government ability to support the upstream activity. And we hope all this troubles end soon for the sake of Lebanon's welfare. My recommendation at the end of this session is always keep monitoring to your model, collect data during the application of the model, and use the analysis of this data in modification for the next model for the favor of Lebanon and the Lebanese people. At the end, I'd like to thank all of you, and I hope I could give you a useful information for you. And I think I will leave the stage for you for any questions. You're welcome to ask any question regarding the EPA or any production sharing agreement or any fiscal regime. Thank you. Thank you for all participants for OPA and LOGI.
Okay, we have I think 3 questions before starting with Ms.Diana. The first one from Ahmed Sabri is saying that you didn't define what's R, A, and B. What do they stand for? Can you elaborate on that?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. EB is Exploration and Production Agreement. EB is the Exploration and Production Agreement. It stands for Exploration and Production. Okay?
Okay. Question from Karim is saying, what will be the split of profit and cost recovery in case of extremely higher operating costs?
In any case of increasing operating cost or capital cost, there is a maximum for cost recovery. There is a maximum for cost recovery, which is 65. And by the way, 65 is a great percentage for in this model. For example, cost recovery in Egyptian model ranges from 20 to 40%. Maximum is 40%, and this pool or this amount of cost recovery can consume any extra cost. For example, Zohr cost recovery is 40%. And as you know, Zohr is a mega project, high capital intensive, and 40% is a good percentage for recovery. So, in case of any high operating cost or high capital cost, there is a limit for cost recovery. If there is any excess over this limit, will be carried forward for the next year. Okay, it's clear?
Okay, thank you. And another question, how about other different types of agreements, not only regarding the production sharing one?
Actually, this webinar is regarding the EPA, which is sort of production sharing agreement, but anyway, there is a lot of agreements all over the world. There is concessionary system, royalty tax system, which is applied in developed countries, and the other systems which is applied in Gulf areas, such as surface agreement, and the production sharing is commonly or the most famous fiscal regime applicable in the world. We can specify another session for the application or the fiscal regime and its specs. This webinar is dedicated for EPA.
Okay, question from Ahmed Dahman. How can we negotiate with international companies to help in building infrastructure with the government in early stages of exploration?
Okay, in early stages of negotiation, for example, we can take an example in Lebanon. There is social commitment for the IOCs. IOCs should spend more and more in infrastructure and enhancement of the community or the infrastructure for the petroleum sector in the first beginning. So, for example, in Lebanon, the cost recovery also is a good item for encouraging the investment in infrastructure in the first beginning or in the exploration phase. In the emerging countries like Lebanon and Mozambique, it's hard or a complex situation. Relies on the decision makers because you are in a very bad situation. You have to keep your resources, or you get benefits from your resources, and also attract investors. And by the way, it's a very complicated issue because as a decision maker, you want to gain more and more for your countries, and also attract investors. So it's complex situation. Should be treated under principle of win-win situations. Ask from the IOC to build an infrastructure for your country and give them high cost recovery and a lot of and also high profit split. This is the main two items that encourage investment in infrastructure. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have other questions, but we will leave them till the end of the session after Ms. Diana finishes. Okay. So, okay. Ms. Diana, now the stage is yours. You can start with the second part.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity of indeed the two signed onto and disclosed. I'm hoping this would be better. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think now it's better.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're having a lot of technical challenges these couple of days because of the electricity problem. So again, I just started off by thanking, can you hear me now, by the way?
Yes, now it's perfect.
Great. I started by thanking Engineer Hani for this really great presentation of what are now disclosed, the two exploration and production agreements that Lebanon has signed onto in 2018 and are currently in the implementation phase. My intervention, which will take around 15 minutes, not more, and then I would like to leave more space for some Q&A, will focus on two things: the contract disclosure process that Lebanon underwent, and then the financial modeling that LOGI tasked Open Oil to do and the main results that came out of it. And they're, just to say it up front, they're completely aligned with what Engineer Hani has already stated. So the issue of exploiting natural resources in Lebanon is definitely not recent. It dates back to the 40s and 70s and 60s. But it really came to fruition in 2010 when the Lebanese government and the parliament decided to ratify the law that launched the whole sector and pushed it forward. The first exploration and production agreements were signed in 2018, and the reason why Lebanon chose, among many reasons, why Lebanon chose to go and adopt a production sharing agreement type of licensing or contracts is the fact that first of all, it needed, according to our constitution, its rights to Earth's natural resources. A concession agreement would give these rights to the company, and the government would end up taking royalties and bonuses. And the second reason, and that was the most important, in contracts such as service contracts, whereby they would pay for the services of exploration, development and production to the IOC, for example, like in Iraq. So these two main reasons led the Lebanese government, headed by the Lebanese Petroleum Administration, to develop these types of contracts, and that's the background. Now, when the contracts, the two exploration production agreements, EPAs, were signed in January of 2018 with this group of international oil companies, Total, French Total, Italian Eni, and Russian Novatek. Our part as non-governmental organizations was to advocate to have these contracts disclosed, published. Lebanon, I know, like many other countries, but is at the stage where a high percentage of corruption is happening. A lot of institutional collapse is occurring. Definitely, transparency is needed to encourage investors to continue coming to Lebanon and to invest. So, this approach towards, adopted by the government and of course pushed by civil society, led by LOGI, Lebanese Oil and Gas Initiative, that I have the honor of heading currently as executive director, they pushed the government to disclose them. Now, for us, the disclosure of the contracts, which was followed by a law that was passed in mid-2018 that obliges now the government to publish all its contracts, was only a milestone for LOGI. So it was a good milestone. It was a good step, but definitely not the end itself or the final result that we wanted of contract, to answer basically two questions. And these questions became even more important for us to have a scientific-based answer on, because of the escalating political meltdown and economic meltdown that Lebanon was encountering, especially during the past 2 years, to culminate, of course, to climax during this year. So the political scene in Lebanon is as follows. We have political parties just tearing apart the current institutions in Lebanon. We have one political party that wants achievements, and this, of course, is countered by many other political parties bashing at the sector because they are against the party. So the petroleum sector, the petroleum sector is really caught in the middle, and from the standpoint of really protecting it, we wanted to answer the following two questions. The first question was, did Lebanon sign off on fair deals? Very simple, straightforward. Did we sign off on a fair deal, or was it not fair? So that was the number one question. The number two question that we wanted to answer was basically around making sure that we are able to use this oil and gas sector or the revenues from the oil and gas sector to save Lebanon. So the question is, will these future revenues from this sector act as a savior for Lebanon and save it from its economic meltdown and help it face or redeem its public debt? It's rising. We don't even have an agreed upon number about how big our debt is. The official numbers are $80 billion US. Unofficial numbers and studies make it rise up to 100 billion. So that's the degree of how bad it is here. In order for us to answer these questions, we wanted to resort to a scientific-based discussion. We didn't want, as a civil society organization, as LOGI, to fire one answer away without basing it on scientific evidence. Yes, we did have a lot of training and development and capacity development on EPAs, on the exploration production agreements that Engineer Hani just sailed us through. But also we wanted to develop a model that Lebanese citizens can use to better understand what the government signed on to. So there is a company called Open Oil, and it is known, it's a Berlin-based company. It's headed by Johnny West, and he has been, for the past 10 years developing all sorts of financial models based on disclosed contracts. So he would be contacted by organizations, sometimes by governments from African countries. The last one is Sierra Leone, where he did, and Mongolia, where he did the financial models for. They would give him the contract, and they would ask him to develop a financial model that will help people assess how good that deal was. So what we did was we gave this disclosed two contracts, the one for block number 4 and the other for block number 9. And these are blocks found in the offshore of Lebanon, Bahr. And we said, we wanted two things. We wanted you to review them, and then based on the fiscal model, fiscal regime that is there, give us an assessment, draw pictures, draw scenarios. Tell us what it would mean if we find a big discovery or a small discovery or a medium discovery. Don't give us something complicated. We wanted to understand, and we wanted every Lebanese to understand, not just the tech savvy. And the second condition was that he would reach out to the regulatory authorities, to the governments, before he completed his financial model, because we believe in a participatory approach to developing any brief or opinion or recommendation that we might have. And this is our LOGI. This is the LOGI's way. And he did so, and that was done 2 months ago. And I'm keen of the time, so I'm going to walk you through the main the findings. So the first finding that he had was around whether the contract was fair or not. You see, this was the first question that we wanted to answer. And the deal, and he wrote, we have them all out published, and the deal that was negotiated in this first licensing round or first bid showed, because of the development, after he developed this financial model, which is now found, we have it in Arabic and English, and it's the first financial model in Arabic, shows an average government take undiscounted of 56% across blocks 4 and 9. So this is roughly in line with the results reported by the government. That was good. So this is how accountability works. We made sure that we worked the numbers and we double checked on what the government was saying. And second of all, this number, the 56 percentile, falls in the middle of the curve of the government take metrics for similar circumstances, and we showed that this actually is a fair deal. It's not so bad. Okay, so we answered basically the first question with numbers, and also in accordance with Engineer Hani, it's not a perfect deal, it's not an excellent deal, it's a good deal. It can be better, definitely, and this is the second part I'll be tackling in a second. The second answer, or the second results that we tackled was, so what does that mean? What if we find a field that is as big as, and don't forget we're in the East Mediterranean, as big as Leviathan? Leviathan is in occupied Palestine waters, developed by, the الكيان الصهيوني, and I have to say it in Arabic, I'm sorry, the name in English fails me, and it's 16 trillion cubic feet. And the question that we wanted to ask is, what if we find such a big field here? What would it mean? How much money or revenues would trickle into Lebanon? So he developed the model, he put in the numbers based on the fiscal model, the tax, the 20% tax, take that the government that Hani told you about, the cost, the profit share, the profit part, of course, if it's gas, we added the royalties, and then we used the regional $6 per MMBTU currently happening, and we assumed that they would extract the whole amount over the span of 30 years. And then we ran some numbers, and I'm going to just give you one number for the sake of time. So if we do actually find a big field, such as Leviathan, and we do have managed to extract all of it to produce everything, and this is usually not the case, as you know, many engineers, I'm sure are present here, do understand, then this will yield the amount of around $8 billion from that field. So compared to a debt of, and I want to stick to the official numbers, of $80 billion, this is not a game changer. And that was one of the key messages we put out there. So we said, so what are the chances of us finding 2, 3, 4 fields? We're being very optimistic. We might, okay? We might not, and we might. And I'll go over the many other scenarios. So this is how much it's going approximately to allow Lebanon to take as revenues. So anybody who's saying that, wait for the oil and gas bonanza because it's going to be the game changer for Lebanon, this is not real. This is selling fish in the sea. What we really need to focus on now are real reforms, so that when these revenues come in, even if they are 8 billion or 4 billion or whatever, then we will be able to put them into sustainable economic development use. So that was one of our key recommendations, and we based it on such simulations. Now, I say this in all faith, but I also have to conclude with a couple of things. And these are the red flags that we all now need to look at. And I would like to involve and have an understanding of what is also happening in Egypt, although Egypt is a whole different playing field with all its discoveries and its past history. So in the middle of this economic or the pandemic that is COVID, that has definitely affected our sector, of course, not our sector, the oil and gas sector in general, and has led to having supply exceeding demand. There are definitely terms that are going to change, and we already see these in current licensing rounds. So now countries are at a point where they need to invest. So Lebanon, for example.
Maybe the last 2 sentences, we didn't hear them, so if you can repeat.
Okay. Sure. Sorry, I'm referring to Total, and Total being one of these investors that have readdressed their investment budget by decreasing it by 25% because of the current situation and the supply exceeding the demand. So what are we witnessing now? Host countries are in a position that they need to readdress and renegotiate their terms, their licensing rounds, so they make these licensing rounds more appealing to investors. And this is where it becomes very critical and important for us to keep a keen eye on the fiscal terms in the agreements and contracts that governments are developing. I want to finish here by stating contract disclosure across all countries has become now more important than anything else. We need to have contract disclosure at a time where terms are going to be renegotiated. The fairness of the deal needs to be looked at, and I think this is what the key takeaways, among the key takeaways that we need to walk out with after today's webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms.Diana. So I have a question for you. Do you think it's too late for Lebanon to start the oil and gas era while it's already ending all around the world? And what about the opportunities for new energies like the wind and solar?
Yeah, a very good question. Actually, I would like to argue with the statement that it's ending all over the world. We're far from it. We're moving into a cleaner form of energy. Gas is a cleaner form of energy. Hydrocarbons are all over the East Med. But what we are seeing currently now is, of course, a big move, maybe a jump start into starting discussions around energy transition, renewable energy. Lebanon today needs to start this discussion. We need to have a very updated, comprehensive national energy policy or strategy that does take into consideration these. We should not be betting on the oil and gas sector as our future savior. We should be starting the discussion on renewables, or else we will find ourselves outside of the game. And that's another key message.
Okay, another question is how Lebanon's sensitive bankruptcy issues are affecting the investments in this sector?
Of course, it does. It does. Unfortunately, I'll give you a very straightforward answer or example, actually. So one of the options that Lebanon has, in case, and please note that we haven't made a single discovery yet, but we're always we keep on being optimistic and hopeful. So in case we do make a discovery and we move to production, one of the possibilities of using the produced gas is for domestic use. Okay, this is great. Every country, as you know, Engineer Hani, and I love your slide, by the way, it's one of the key strategic priorities to make sure that domestic demand is satisfied. Very good. In a country that is ailing and really about to collapse because of its internal debt, how will you convince an international oil company to come and invest, extract this gas, and then move forward and give it or sell it to Électricité de Liban, Lebanese electricity company? And while the company might at any second proclaim that it is not able to pay for this international oil company or to buy off its domestic its gas, or even does not have the backup of the government to do so. So this is very precarious for such companies, and no, it sends the bad signal, and no company would want to invest in a country that is collapsing economically. I grant you this one, unfortunately.
Okay, I have a question for Engineer Hani. What are the main reasons that cause IOCs or investors to walk away from certain countries or regions? And how could this be solved through the government or lawmakers?
Okay, actually, it's a good question, and I think the question has come from Egypt. The reason behind the IOC leaving countries are firstly the political instability. This is the first reason, and the second is the high operating cost in some of mature fields, especially at low oil price environment. So at this phase, we should deal with this phase with different concept. The term shouldn't remain constant as in exploration and development phase. We should deal with this phase when with another concept, maybe raising the cost recovery limit, accelerating the recovery of capex, some optimization of cost optimization should be worked, and I think this is the main reason for IOC leaving the countries.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Ms.Diana. How do you see the contracts between the seismic contractors and your state?
The seismic, you mean the seismic surveys? Very good question. We don't see the contracts, and that's a big issue, and this is something that we are heavily and passionately advocating for. The contracts are not disclosed, while we do understand that there are some secret or in the need for some secrecy on some of the clauses to ensure competitiveness amongst those that are buying the seismic packages. We see no reason why the whole contracts should not be shared with the members of parliament, with the Lebanese parliament, or after hiding some of sensitive clauses with the greater public. This is something we're working on. We know that already revenues have started coming into since 2010 and maybe even a bit before into the Lebanese coffers from sales of seismic data, and we are of course pursuing this in the hope of full disclosure. We already have a number disclosed, which is the amount of $43 million now that have entered the Lebanese government, Ministry of Energy from these sales. But we need, of course, full disclosure on how these numbers accumulated and why and what is happening to them.
Okay, I think we answered all the questions. So I would like to thank you, Engineer Hani and Ms. Diana, for this amazing session, which delivered very new information for me personally and guests for everyone about the contracts, financial models, and all the details that you talked about in the Lebanese petroleum sector. Finally, I would like to thank the Lebanese and Oil and Gas Initiative, LOGI, and all the people who attended this session. I would like also to thank my colleagues in OPA for their efforts. And I know that there were a lot of technical issues for people to join, so this session will be recorded and we will put it on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it again. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook for the news. And thank you a lot. You can also find the feedback form in the chat. You can fill it in. We would like to hear your opinion about this session and your recommendations. So thank you a lot and have a nice evening.